the issue is, what can you do to find and keep good, motivated employees? Now, to understand that, I think it really helps to step back and look at, well, why are all these people leaving? I mean, we call it the Great Resignation, right? So much has been happening the last couple of years in terms of people leaving jobs. And I came across this study. It's probably the best study I've seen of why people have been leaving. This was done by a market research firm in about 6 months of activity in 2021. And during that period, about 27 million people left their jobs. And this firm studied posts on Glassdoor, and you may be familiar with Glassdoor. If you're not, it's a site where current or former employees can review businesses that they've worked at or they currently work at. And so they studied over 1 million different posts to the site of people who had left their job and why they said they left their job. And so this is the result of what they found of all those posts. And what was interesting is you think compensation would be very high on the list, and it's actually pretty low on the list. And they related everything to compensation. So you can see here that if for every one indication that, well, I left my job because of the pay, you had almost 2 left the job because of poor response to COVID, 3 because of this. The highest one was 10 times the people left their jobs because of toxic corporate culture. So what I'd like to do is just kind of explore this a little bit, because I think it's very revealing about why people are leaving their jobs. And they leave jobs because they're not getting what they want out of their jobs. So what do they want? What are we seeing here? Well, first of all, employees they do want competitive pay and benefits, of course. But now, talk about COVID and poor response. Well, they also want safe working conditions, right? And then you have failure to recognize employee performance. What do they want there? They want to be recognized. They want to have an opportunity to grow. How about high levels of innovation? That was kind of an interesting one. And what the authors found out after looking closely is these are really companies, these are like the really high pressure, high tech firms where you're expected to work 60, 70 hours and very demanding. And so, that really means people wanted some reasonable schedules and work demands. Job insecurity and reorganization. Well, people want to be informed. Insecurity means I don't know what's going on. I want to be informed and maybe even have a little say in what happens, the way things get reorganized. And then lastly, the big one is the toxic corporate culture. And the way I look at that is employees, they want to be treated respectfully. And then these toxic cultures, they're not. There's a lot of abuse, not just between, from the top, but also even within employees. So that's what's happening. So what can we do? How can we answer the question? Well, I think it's actually not that complicated. What you can do to find and keep motivated employees, you do have to offer competitive pay and benefits. You got to pay them, but that's not enough. They want pay, they want respect, and they want recognition. That's pretty much it. Okay. And you might be saying at this point, well, I don't know. I've got employees. I think I respect them. I think they're getting recognized. But in reality, most workers are not. And I'll give you some evidence of that. The Gallup company, I'm sure most or all of you are familiar with Gallup, has been for now about 23 years been doing a poll of workers in the United States and actually around the world, but I'll refer to the United States. And of the extent to which the workers feel what they call engaged in their job, meaning are they interested in their job? Are they excited about it? Are they committed to it? Are they proud of what they do? Those types of things. And what they've consistently found for the last 20 some years, and it's changed a bit, but not much, is that out of every 10 workers, 3 feel they are engaged. 3 have a real interest in what they do. They're committed, they're excited. 5 of the 10 workers are disengaged. What that means is they really don't care a lot. They're really working for a paycheck. They're not really that proud of what they do or their company. 2 of the 10 workers are what Gallup calls actively disengaged, means they're basically miserable. They are actively, in some cases, sabotaging, bad mouthing. So, only 3 out of 10 consistently in the United States of workers are in this engaged category. So it really is, it is a problem. And so what I want to do is explore why is it, and it can be tough because as a, I've been a former business owner and been a manager, and a lot of times you don't understand, you don't realize, and you have to get in from the perspective of the employee. And so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to kind of step back and describe what I call the micromanagement trap. And this is what I've observed even in my own situation and in many other businesses and business owners. And I'll talk a little bit I'll get into it about my experiences in business, which go back to 1988 when we first got into business. But when I first started, I fell into this trap. Okay, so let me describe it. So what's the trap? Well, if you, in this trap of micromanagement, workers get caught in a trap where they're being told what to do. They're being micromanaged. This is what you do. This is how you do it. And they feel they have no voice. And the thing that used to drive me crazy was when, if an employee would say to a customer where there was a problem, I'm sorry, that's just our policy. It's like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. And I'm sure you've heard that from sometimes when you're dealing, with service personnel in general. And when an employee says that, what are they really saying? They're really saying, yeah, I agree with you, customer. This policy is pretty bad, but I just got to put up with it. You too. Sorry, it's just a job for me. No supporting it. And I would, if I ever heard it, which I sometimes did with my employees, I'd say, well, explain it. I try to explain it to them. Well, this is why we do it. But basically, early on in business, I just felt I didn't have the time to explain a lot of things. And so I would tell people what to do. I mean, I fell into it. Workers in this trap, they feel like they're kept in the dark. I didn't have that much time, I felt, to explain what's going on and here's what's happening, and have the time to actually listen to their work and respect their ideas and so forth. And I tried to show appreciation, but a lot of them felt they were in the dark. They feel they're being treated unfairly. You don't understand my problems. They work for their paycheck and they watch the clock. I mean, and early on, I kind of felt like, well, maybe that's how it is. That's what you hear, right? So as a manager, I was caught in the trap too, because I felt poorly towards the workers. I feel their workers don't seem to care about their jobs. And I'd say, I would think I would do this. If I wanted something done right, I have to do it myself. Also, it's like I have to do all the thinking. And I'm a little suspicious about workers do or what don't they do behind my back. And because when we first got into business, some of the workers were moving to competitors. And so I was hesitant to really share too much with them. And, we had some pretty major theft of power tools back then. And so, I mean, I had reason to be suspicious. So anyway, that was my experience. I think is true of many business situations. And what I've learned over the years is there's a much better way to do it. Okay. And the gemba walk is the technique we'll talk about tonight. But as I say, this whole lean management idea is really a better way. It's a better way of managing. It's not always the easiest way, but it is the best. It is a better way. In my opinion, the best way. So let's talk about the gemba walk and see how it addresses some of these problems and can help you to actually motivate your employees. So the gemba walk is a technique. It's a lean management technique where managers visit their workers at their place of work. That's what we call the gemba. That's what in Japanese, the word for place of work is gemba. And the idea of going there is you observe the work in action and you coach the worker. So it's very much of a, personal one-on-one visit the place where the work's getting done. And there's really two main reasons for doing it. One is it gives you a chance as a manager and owner to really get more in-depth knowledge and awareness of what's happening in your business. And gives you an opportunity to identify problems, look at ways of improving. So it really just raises your understanding and awareness, and it can directly improve the operation in that way. But the second reason is at least as important, and maybe even more important, is it is a powerful way of providing that respect and recognition that so many workers are looking for, and that ends up making this whole world of business work just so much better in so many ways. So let's get into it to see how to do it. Fujio Cho, I think he's retired now. He's the chairman, was the chairman of Toyota. Of course, Lean was greatly inspired by and came out of the work of Toyota. And Chairman Cho's advice to managers when they did gemba walks at Toyota was this, and it's a very famous saying among Lean circles: go see, ask why, show respect. So I'll use Chairman Cho's words and to explain, what is involved in the gemba walk technique. So first part, go see. The idea of go see is, the basic premise is that there's only so much you can learn from reports and data analysis, that what I call secondhand sources of information. Okay, I've estimated, maybe 20% of what you need to know about work you can get from those reports. 80% or more, you have to go talk to people, you have to go look, you have to go see, you have to experience it yourself. And so that's what happens is, in a gemba walk, you're going to see, and to get that true understanding of how the work is being performed. And the gemba, like in our case now, our business was a wholesale business of cabinet and furniture hardware. And I'll give you a little more background on that in a little bit. But some of my employees were field sales reps, and they would go to cabinet shops where they made kitchen cabinets and furniture. And that was the gemba for our sales representative. That's where they did their work. It was in the field, showing cabinet shop owners and cabinet makers how to use our product, what are the new products, helping them with problems, so forth. So I would go on a gemba walk. We call it a ride along. I'd go see with the sales rep to these shops, and I learned so much. It was just so unbelievable. There's so much more you learn from, that you don't see in the sales reports, and you can see what this customer is buying, but you go there and you hear their problems and the personalities of the different customers and the challenges of competitors and the pricing pressures and all of that. So much you learn. And it's whenever you go to the gemba, whether the gemba is, in this case, the cabinet shop, or the gemba, another gemba was our warehouse floor for warehouse workers, or the office area and so forth. And I do want to say, learning to observe like this is a skill. You have to develop it. I'd often come back and my sales rep would say, did you notice how such and such? And I'd say, I didn't even see that, so you really have to work on this as a skill. The next one is, so that's go see, ask why. Ask, listen, learn, okay? Ask, don't tell. That's tough. Managers, owners, we feel like we have the answers. I know I did. I learned over time, and actually there's a lot of good answers I don't have, but don't blurt out your answer. And it's not your job to give the answer. Your job actually is to develop that employee so they can come up with answers. And it takes time, but I learned with experience that it's worth the investment of time, okay? Listen to their workers' ideas. They often have good ideas. Tons of good ideas came from the workers. And again, listening is another critical skill that's in short supply. You have to learn how to do it. And then, based on what you're listening, learn about the work, kind of develop a mental picture of how things are actually working, and also learn about the worker. What problems are they having? What are their preferences? You may pick up something here, or some small thing that maybe a worker's getting ready to leave, and by actually visiting and talking with them, you might be able to save somebody from leaving, just with maybe sometimes it's simple things. And then lastly, show respect. And the way you show respect is by giving feedback and following up. So feedback is where you share information, give some guidance. You don't overload them, don't tell them what to do, but Give them information they need to be successful. In the case of our sales reps, okay, it's a very competitive environment here, very price sensitive. And our sales reps needed to know the cost of our products. And as a distributor and a retailer, any of you involved in that business, you know, that's something that's a pretty closely guarded secret. You don't like your costs being known. But we eventually shared that because it made our sales reps that much better and helped them to be successful. So the idea of need to know is still there. You can't share everything with everybody, but don't be overly concerned about it. You know, be willing to share your information. And then follow up. You know, that's how you respect their ideas. If the idea shows promise, you know, consider it. Try to follow up on it. If the idea is weak or flawed, don't just ignore it. That's the worst thing you can do. Treat it as a teachable moment. Give the feedback and say, well, here's, you know, here's why. Maybe you'll come up with an alternative idea. So, and these are just some of the do's and don'ts. I won't go through these in detail, but I'll cover this a little bit more when we get to the field trial section at the end here. But this basically it's not just what you say during these visits, it's how you say it. And these can be difficult to recognize. You have to kind of understand how you're coming across to the worker. You want the worker to feel at ease, you know, do more listening than talking. Don't make it seem like an interrogation. And especially don't blame the worker. It's a tough one. I mean, sometimes it is a worker's fault, but you have to do that in the right way. So that's basically what a gemba walk is. And how does that avoid the trap? And this is, again, what I learned and really began doing this later in my experience at Trend Distributors. The workers avoid the trap because now they feel they have a bit of a say in how things are done, sometimes leading them to feel even a sense of ownership, okay? And as I started teaching afterwards at Nova, I'd often ask my entrepreneurship students, you know, what's the best way to get employees to buy into something and really accept an idea? And certainly the worst way is just to tell them what to do and say, go do it. So one way is to sell them on it and say, well, here's a new idea and here's why it's good for you and for the company. Okay, that's good. Even better is to get their involvement in it and say, well, here, help participate with me. Help me. What do you think of this? Let me give you your opinion on this. The absolute best way to get a worker to buy in on an idea is if it's their idea. And that's happened. That's happened. And boy, if you want to see an energetic, committed, engaged worker come up with an idea, and then that's what you do. And they're so proud of it. Believe me, and that's how you get to that ownership feeling. They feel more informed because they're hearing from you. They're hearing from the managers. They feel more respected and appreciated as managers visit the gemba, ask for opinions, give guidance. What I learned as I moved into academia is that research studies have shown unequivocally that the most significant factor in how an employee feels about his or her job and the company is that relationship with the direct supervisor. There's nothing more important than that. There's other things, but that's the most important thing. So they feel their problems are better understood. They're energized. You know, they want the money. They pursue the compensation, but they also pursue the recognition. And so you have to, you know, understand that. And so you got some happy workers there. Managers avoid the trap because they don't feel so badly about workers. They're more encouraged to say, hey, look at the initiative taken by some of these workers, and you develop respect for the workers. They show who show they want to participate in solving problems and making improvements. So, and there you got a happy manager. That was me. The actual, you know, techniques, but kind of in a broader sense, here's what I learned, what's going on. And I've been kind of living through this over the last 40, 50 years. There's a shift going on in management thinking. And this is important to understand. The traditional way of kind of management thinking is sort of this supervisory model or sort of command and control where, you know, you direct your employees, you tell them what to do, you control them, keeping an eye on them, keeping reports. You reward those that do do a good job, you punish those that don't. And you're mainly looking for employees to comply with what you want. You know, this is what I want. This is what I want you to do. And that certainly worked, and it still works today. But it is a lower trust kind of environment, because you're basically saying, I don't really trust your ideas, Mr. or Mrs. Worker. I'm going to tell you what to do, and I'm going to kind of keep an eye on you. I'm not quite sure what are you going to do it or not. So I sort of view this. Oops, I'm sorry. I view this as sort of like a tiger manager, right? So the manager is tiger, where okay, you better do what the tiger says, or you might get bitten. You know, so there's kind of a fear factor to it, not entirely, but. And what I'm seeing a transition to, and it's not an either or, but it's transitioning into a more partnering kind of way of managing. And lean is really at kind of the core of this new way of thinking, where instead of directing, you're guiding, okay? Instead of controlling, you're coaching. We still want to reward, and sometimes you have to punish and even terminate people at times, but you really more and more try to recognize, not just through money, but through other means, recognize achievement and celebrate it. And what you're trying to do here, yeah, you want compliance, but you really want engagement. And this tends to be a higher trust environment. And what I like to say is, and what I've heard other people say is, in the traditional way of managing, it's something you do to employees. And as you begin to get into the partnering, managing becomes something you do with employees. So I think that's, pretty much clarifies where that's going. And I'm sorry. And I sort of relate this more to like the elephant's way of leading, sort of leading by example. I mean, more of a trusting kind of thing. But, there's times when you fear the elephant too, like don't mess with the elephant. But so anyway, but like I say, it's important to understand that. And really, when we say thinking, we're really talking about culture. I mean, it's really the way that things get done, the way that, people are treated and so forth. And so what I feel lean is doing, it's providing new kinds of tools, because a new kind of culture is going to need some new methods. And that's what you're getting here. So the Gemba walk, for example, is a new method that you can use to implement and operationalize that more participatory partnering kind of way of managing. The older ways of motivating employees was performance reviews. You check the boxes and do analysis and compensation plans and benefits. And you still do those. I mean, we're not throwing these out. We're supplementing them. We're transitioning. And in order to transition, we need to come up with some new tools and techniques. And that's what you're learning in tonight, as well as in the next three parts. So that's kind of an overview of lean management, kind of where I'm going with all this. Now let's talk about trust, because we saw earlier that we're moving more towards a higher trust kind of environment, and for a number of reasons. There's some generational change going on. Younger generation workers, don't accept certain situations that in the past they might have done, and then in the pandemic, of course, provides options for people who felt like, well, I got to stay in this job, I have no options. And now they have a lot of options, and it kind of opened their mind to different ways. So but trust is such a key factor, a key thing to understand. And so that's why I focus here. And here's why trust is important in lean. So when you do any of these techniques, like the Gemba walk, right? You're going to go do a Gemba walk, you will get short-term improvement. I can tell you will. The question is this going to be sustainable? And you've probably seen that. Those of you that have tried improvement methods, and we're going to try this and that, and sometimes things work right away, and then they stop working, they regress. And a lot of that has to do with worker acceptance. So do you get sustainable performance? Well, turns out the Gemba walk and all the other 5 lean techniques all develop trust. They're going to help you to develop trust. Now, if you understand the importance of trust and buy into this idea that, yeah, you know, that's something we really need to work on. We got to get our culture of trust and respect really built up. Then you focus on it, and it makes the gemba walk better. Okay, the more trust you have, the more people are going to be willing to share their information, share their problems, be honest about what's happening. It's going to make all that communication interaction so much more effective. And of course, you've got a feedback loop here, right? So the gemba walk, along with the other techniques, are all, not only do they create trust or build trust, but they need trust. And it's a virtuous cycle. So that's why trust is just so important. And you can see, if you do that, get that going, sustainability really is no longer a factor. You will get sustainable performance. But you got to keep it up, but you have to understand it as the leader. I'll give you some pointers on how to do that. So basically, trust is really, surprisingly, we don't always talk about it so much, but it just really makes everything better and faster and easier and less costly. And a couple of studies, I'm especially going to focus on Covey's work, but this was a study by Zach where he focused in on specifically comparing low trust companies with high trust companies, and what performances were reported. And look at this: double the energy at work, 76% more engagement. There's that level of, employees feeling connected and committed to work. Less stress, 74% less stress, 50% higher productivity, more satisfaction with their lives. I mean, geez, come on. Now, Stephen M.R. Covey, and those of you that know the, Covey's work, which is fantastic, is the 7 Habits book and some of the other books. Stephen M.R. is actually his son, and he's done the best work I know of in terms of describing and showing how important trust is in not only business situations, but in politics and society in general. He's observed that if you increase the trust level in an organization, you can increase its performance by as much as 7 times. And so I've kind of taken up that, which I completely, agree with, and I've used his work to develop a way of assessing trust, actually measuring it. It's a subjective measure, but I found it to be pretty useful. And so when I get into the field trial, I'll talk about that as well for how to do a trust assessment and use the tool. But the idea of assessing trust is, why do we do that? Well, I kind of view, if you view your business as kind of a car and you're driving it, if you're down in a very low trust area, you're basically driving a jalopy. Okay, it might get you there, it might not, it might break down, it's going to use a lot of gas, it's going to make noise. Okay, it's just compared with, if you're very high in the trust, it's like driving a Tesla or an EV of some sort, that just so much easier and more efficient getting where you are. So that's the idea in general of why even look at this. What kind of car are you driving at? Is trust a strength or a weakness for your business? That's important to understand. And if you do want to get into lean management, it's also critical, of course, component of lean management. And so on the front end, I always recommend businesses do this assessment to kind of see where they're at now, and it helps them to understand, what direction they need to go to improve trust. And you can even use it to track, maybe once a year, pull it out and kind of reassess where you stand. And I won't go into all the details of it, but basically you've got 4 dimensions that get scored, and you have a working atmosphere, which is, I can always tell as soon as I walk into a business what I can pretty much assess the level just from the feel. To what extent is there grumbling or camps, or or is there a lot of positive confidence going on? Personal relationships also, are they very dysfunctional? Is there a lot of arguments going on? So these top 2 rows are kind of the results of low levels or high levels of trust. But then you have management style, which is where you can affect the trust. And that's actually what we're talking about tonight, right? Management style, here's micromanagement. And, as you do gemba walks, you can move, higher on this, get more open communication, less blaming, and so forth. And even policies and procedures. So these go along with it, that this is where the cost of trust comes in, or distrust, that if there's a lot of distrust, you have a lot of controls in place, and those are all costly. And so actually policies and procedures, we actually cover that as well in the next three parts of the webinar. So, so that's the idea of assessing and tracking trust. So I'm going to stop in just a little bit here, and we'll take general questions, and I'll get into the field trials. But let me just end this part of it with talking about, what can you do as the leader, whether you're the owner, general manager, other manager, what can you do to really make this work and build trust? And the first thing is you have to show respect. I mean, you can't be somebody who abuses people. That seems pretty obvious. But also you have to demand mutual respect. Demand it of everybody. And that was a real hot button for me at Trend. I was generally pretty easygoing. Well, maybe I was, maybe I wasn't, but but if there was a lack of respect between employees or whatever, there was no compromising on that. I stopped that. And that extended to customers, by the way, too. If there were customers who were really disrespecting my employees, we would fire customers. Okay, there's no reason to take abuse. I don't care who you are. So that's rule number one. The next thing is you really have to kind of model these trustworthy behaviors. You have to be honest. You have to be fair. You have to be loyal, and you have to be accountable too. And that I'm going to focus on that one because that's really important. Being accountable to yourself, to say as a leader, as the owner, hey, I messed up here. I'm sorry. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do better. And what you're doing is but here's the thing, and managers often, we always say, oh, we got to hold our employees accountable. Well, yeah, that's the traditional thinking. But the new thinking is you show them how to hold themselves accountable. It makes life so much better if you can do that. But you have to model it first by holding your own self accountable as the leader. You have to be willing to trust and give the benefit of the doubt. And, different people have different, if you've been burned a lot in the past, that can be hard to do. That's something you have to work on. And of course, you have to learn how to trust and verify. It's not, you don't give everybody everything. It's a skill like some of these other things. Hire for character and train the skills. I've really learned that over the years. Some of our best employees knew nothing about their area that they eventually were trained in. It's just hire good character, people that can learn, that are willing to learn. And lastly, terminate employees if they have serious character flaws. I mean, you always want to go as far as you can with somebody who's trying, do what you can to really help them. But if somebody just really has a bad attitude, has serious character flaws in whatever way, you have to get rid of them. And we had to do that with a few employees over the 10 years. And it hurt us. These were actually pretty high performing employees, and we took a hit early on, but it was not good for the whole culture. And so we had to do that. So is this easy? Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not so easy to do some of what I'm asking you here. But a couple of bits of good news. Okay, one is, as a small business, you're in a much better position to do this than large corporations. It's so hard for a large corporation to build trust throughout an organization. There's so many variables. Culture is very difficult to judge. And so it actually levels the playing field. It's a real advantage for you against some of the larger players that you're able to build this kind of trust. The other bit of good news is the bar is kind of low. Remember, 7 out of 10 workers in the US are either pretty much bored in their job or they're miserable. So, and you don't have to be perfect. You know, just try to move in that direction. What I found is if you actually truly care about your workers and you show them, they'll forgive a lot of stuff. So anyway, that is my story. I'm not changing it. And let me go ahead and, or maybe I will change it. So let me go ahead and open it up for questions. And then after that, I can get into the field trials for those of you that want to continue on with that.